Okay. Hi, everyone. Like I said, my name is Nick McQueen. This event is planned especially for prospective undergraduate and graduate students interested in education that teaches you teamwork, creativity, design, thinking, innovation, and problem solving. As Chicago's only comprehensive tech university, Illinois Tech prepares you to achieve your dreams by giving you hands-on experience, teaching you 21st century skills that will help you succeed in careers that may not even exist yet. Illinois Tech makes students and their career success our top priority, and that's why we launched at the Illinois Tech Elevate Promise. As an Illinois Tech student, you'll receive three things: guaranteed experience, a guaranteed Elevate Your Future plan, and a guaranteed job placement. Undergraduate students are guaranteed 2 or 3 out of classroom experiences during their time in college. These include internships, research experiences, study abroad opportunities, and more. All of you graduate students here will be able to work alongside our full-time faculty and participate in research and real-world projects. As a student, you will receive integrated career and academic support from faculty and staff that will help you create a customized Elevate plan to help you map out your coursework and your entire career pathway. By combining these skills, you'll gain from out-of-classroom experiences and the support you'll receive from creating your Elevate Your Future plan. You'll receive guaranteed job placement or admission into a graduate or professional school within 6 months of graduation. Today's event features one of our greatest alumni and inventor of the cell phone, Mr. Marty Cooper, who can tell you more about his experiences at Illinois Tech. Before I hand it over, I just want to go over briefly of our kind of Q&A portion about how our event is going to be set up today. So thank you to all of you who have submitted pre-questions for Mr. Cooper. We're hoping to get as many questions as possible. Given our time restraints, we may not be able to answer every single question that we have, but feel free to put some questions in the chat. We'd be happy to answer as many as we possibly can. All admissions related questions will be able to be sent individually to your admission counselor or to the admission@iit.edu email address. We have some wonderful staff here today, but if you have questions about your financial aid package, about your specific admissions, we'd be happy to connect with you on a later date. If you stay until the end, we'll share the one way you can start gaining out of classroom experience before even applying to Illinois Tech in the form of a virtual internship. But enough from me. Here is our Vice President of Advancement, Ernie, to introduce our guest of honor.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, and I can't tell you what an honor it is for me to introduce the one and only Marty Cooper. In fact, he really doesn't need an introduction, but I need to give you a little bit of background on his path to today. Marty earned his bachelor's degree and master's degree in electrical engineering from Illinois Tech in 1950 and 57. He is a life trustee of the Board of Trustees, and he and his wife, Arlene, are actually personal friends of mine. Marty, thank you so much for your leadership and for making time to be a part of this important university initiative. Marty is an engineer, an inventor, entrepreneur, and a futurist. He is known as the father of the cell phone. He led the creation of the world's first cell phone at Motorola and made the first public call on it. Over nearly 3 decades at Motorola, Marty contributed to the development of pagers, two-way radio dispatch systems, quartz crystal manufacturers, and more. A serial entrepreneur, he and Arlene have co-founded numerous wireless technology companies, including Cellular Business Systems. Marty is currently the chairman of Dyna LLC and a member of the FCC's Technological Advisory Council. He was the first to observe the law of spectrum capacity, which became known as Cooper's Law. Marty, I'm sure the students are excited to hear from you now. Take it away.
Well, I'm very excited to talk to this group as well. In fact, I'm not sure I know what to say. I'm talking to people from all over the world, from Turkey, China, Nigeria, India, and even New York, all exotic places that I have not been to recently. It's really presumptuous of me to give advice to anybody, and especially so much of you all at the same time. So I'm going to do my best, but I do prefer to talk to people, not to groups, I don't like to give speeches. I like to talk to people one-to-one. So any of you should feel free to turn your cameras on so I really know I'm talking to people. I know that Daniel Sabarano has got his speaker on, and I appreciate that. Musa, thank you for turning yours on. So I'm going to talk to you about a few random things. I really want to talk to you about what you're interested in. And so I would encourage you to ask questions. I'll respond to as many as you can. And I know that the questions you're going to ask are things that are important to you in making your decision about where to go to school. I start out with the presumption that IIT is a great school because I went there and got 2 degrees from IIT. And I've been involved with IIT ever since. And I'm so grateful that I made the decision to go to IIT. But I'm not sure that IIT is right for everybody. And maybe that's why I'm here today. You get a feel for what are the reasons that I thought that IIT succeeded for me. So let me start by first mentioning that it would have been very hard for me to give this talk 10 or 20 years ago, because by a good part of my life, I just assumed that I was just lucky, that I was lucky in who my parents are, so I have the right DNA, that I was lucky to go to the right high school and college, and that I was lucky to fall into Motorola. So about 10 years ago, I decided to write a book. And I decided it wasn't all luck. Luck was kind of important, but I happened to run into the right kinds of people, and a lot of what happened to me was pretty deliberate. And maybe if I express some of my experiences to you, they will be useful to you in making a decision to know whether IIT was the right place. So just in case you're not all real familiar, Ernie thinks that I'm famous. That's only because he has to be nice to me. But I did introduce and I conceived of the first cell phone. It was a long time ago, almost 50 years ago. The introduction of the cell phone happened in New York. In 1973, it was based upon one fundamental premise, and that is that people are mobile. They're fundamentally mobile. They're naturally mobile. That sounds kind of crazy to say that now when we're all so hooked on the cell phone. But the time that I'm talking about was almost prehistoric. You won't believe this when I look at all of your young faces, but in 1973, not only are there no cell phones, there was no internet, there were no digital cameras, the personal computer had not been invented yet, so they were really very primitive times. But the idea that people could talk remotely was not a new one. I was in the two-way radio business at Motorola. We had realized that there were businesses that public safety, the police departments and people who do emergency services could not operate their businesses, their operations, without being able to communicate with people on the move. And one example of that was that the superintendent of police of Chicago approached us and said, you know, I've been revolutionizing our police department. I'm trying to get police to understand that their jobs is to protect people, to work with people on the streets. And here my police officers are stuck in their cars. And I want them to be among the people. Can you figure out a way so I can stay in touch with them, so I can manage them, so I can call my police officers and get them to emergencies and still let them mingle with the people that they are here to protect. And so we developed a product for the city of Chicago that was that the policeman carried with him on his belt. Now, you would think they'd be very happy about that, wouldn't you? So sure enough, while I was working on this telephone, on this two-way radio, I got stopped by a policeman who thought that I was driving too fast. None of you believe that I was driving too fast, right? I'm sure he made a mistake, but so I figured, I'm going to get avoid getting a ticket. I'm going to say, I said, officer, I'm sorry that I was driving too fast, but I'm here to help you because I have created a two-way radio that you can carry with you, that you have put on your belt, and you can stay in touch with people all the time. He says, yeah, the one thing I don't need is another thing on my belt. I've got on my belt a pair of handcuffs. I've got on my belt a baton. I got on my belt my booklet for giving people tickets. I got all these other things. I don't need another thing. And he wrote me a ticket. That didn't work. What did work was that when we finally did make this two-way radio that a police officer could carry with him all the time, when in his car at work, because he had an antenna stuck on his shoulder, and when he got out of the street, he could keep talking and still be among the people that he was there to protect. And sure enough, within months after our introducing this thing, a police officer interrupted a burglary. The burglar shot him in the leg, and he was lying on the ground and called for help. And within minutes, somebody came not only to save his life, but to capture the burglar. And all of a sudden, police stopped complaining about having to carry another thing on their belt. So when we in 1969, the phone company. I'm sure every one of your countries has at one time or another had a monopoly running the telephone business. Almost every country of the world now has competition, competing companies providing services. But at that time, there was one phone company, and they had one laboratory, Bell Laboratories, which you may have heard of, which is a marvelous engineering organization. And they decided that it was time for people to have phones that they could carry with them, that ordinary people, not just business people, not just public safety people, could have a phone that they could carry with them. Their version of this kind of a phone was a car phone. Now, that didn't make any sense to me at all. For 100 years, we had been told that we were going to be captured, that we were going to be chained to our desks, we were going to be stuck in our homes if we wanted to communicate with somebody else by this pair of wires. And here the Bell system comes along and they say, no, we don't need those wires anymore, but we're going to trap you in your cars. Didn't make any sense to me at all. We believed that people needed communications all the time. And that's why we developed our version of a cell phone. I'm going to show you what that cell phone looked like. Doesn't look like a cell phone, does it? This unit, you can see how big it is. I'll put it next to my head. So you notice that we designed it so that your mouth and your earpiece were close together. All this phone could do is talk and listen. It weighed 2.5 pounds, over a kilo. And the battery life was only 25 minutes of talking. It turns out that wasn't a problem because there's nobody that can hold up 2.5 pounds for much longer than 25 minutes. So battery life was not a problem, and of course we've solved that today. Everybody, all of you know what the result of that is. We put up a battle. That battle took 10 years to convince our regulators, the commission that decides how the radio spectrum would be used. And it took us 10 years to convince them that we had the best approach. And they made two decisions. One is that there would not be a monopoly, that there would be competition. And the second decision they made was that the industry would decide what the best approach is to solve this problem of communicating with people. And of course, the industry decided that personal communications was the way to go. So first of all, you ought to know that I didn't create this phone by myself. It was my idea to do it, but I had a team of very wonderful people. Now, the second thing that I should disabuse you of is people talk about the eureka moment. When did you have that great idea? Well, yes, it is true that the idea for the cell phone came to me sometime in November of 1972, when we realized that this was not, that our opinion was not known by everybody else, that we really had to do something special to convince people that personal phones were the way to go, not car phones. We're talking about where the idea did come to me in 1972. I discovered when I started to write this book that I started 10 years ago, that the idea of being able to build a cell phone was created by a career that was started when I was in high school. Certainly was developed while I was in college and was built up step by step for my whole career. It was not a eureka moment. My entire life was a bunch of events that happened in that regard. And you can't predict, none of you can predict exactly what's going to happen to you. Every one of you is different from every other one of you. But the basic elements of what made my life very successful, and I don't want to spend a lot of time defining what success is, but that it involved a lot of people. It certainly involved luck. It involved the people associated, it involved the jobs that I got, but there were a couple of common elements. I learned a long time ago that if you want to do something important in your life, you have to take a chance. The world, for the most part, is very forgiving of failure, but you don't have to take a chance because failing is not very desirable either. And so it takes a very special kind of personality to be willing to take a chance, try something different, do something that other people have not done, and accept the fact that if things go wrong, you're going to get another chance. And that, I can't tell you how many things that I've done in my life that have failed. And I have learned from every single one of those. And I wouldn't skip that, whatever event caused that failure, if I had my life to leave over, because I learned from every one of those things. Which leads me on to a second thing. What do you think the most important thing in life when you want to talk about what success is, what you're reaching for is? I know you're not going to believe this because it doesn't sound, it sounds like I'm lecturing. The most exciting thing in my life is learning a new thing, getting a new vision of a new way of explaining something, a new understanding of something. I can't tell you what a thrill I get when I do that. Even sometimes they're original thoughts that I get. Sometimes they are original for me, but 100 other people have thought of them. But I have never stopped ever, not only learning, but thirsting for learning. At some point, you have to put that learning into action. So certainly that's important. But there is so much satisfaction in the learning process alone. But I have to tell you, and this is scientific, common. It's based upon lots of studies. Learning is not only important for the satisfaction that you get, but it's also important because if you stop learning, if you become so satisfied with what you know and you don't think you have to know anything else, you don't have to be curious anymore, it turns out you lose the ability to learn. Can you imagine that? But that happens to a lot of people in the world, that they lose interest. And a lot of these people are very well-to-do financially. For one reason or another, they decide, I don't have to learn anything anymore. I'm not curious about anything. I'm going to keep doing whatever I'm doing now and not think about anything else. And within a year or two, if they change their minds, they can't do it. Their wiring in their brain is such they have lost the ability to learn. To me, that's the most terrible thing that can happen to an individual. So that's going to be the end of my lecturing on what I think that you should think about and what you should do. I want to remind you that this is not a lecture, that this is a conversation. So anybody thinks of something, if you disagree with me, I would love to hear you disagree so I can at least defend myself. And I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just trying to give you a different viewpoint. So anybody who wants to say something, Nick, all they have to do is push turn their speakers on and talk, or is there a way for them to alert us?
Yeah, if you would be open to questions from the masses, you're more than welcome to do that. You can put it in the chat, or if you would like to turn it on, you're more than welcome to. We have some questions that some students sent in before that we're more than happy to start with. And then maybe if we have some other questions that students are interested in, they can start with that. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, this is not a requirement. If you haven't figured out by now, I can talk forever because I love to talk and share my experiences. And when you're 92 years old, you have so many experiences to share, you never run out of them. So, but if anybody wants to interrupt me at any time, I encourage you to do that. But why don't we start out with one of the questions that was submitted,
Awesome.
and then I'll respond to that, and then I'm going to ask all of you to come up with something. You know, I'm looking here, and Zoe, did I pronounce your name right? Obviously not, because you're not responding. Your last name is Quidros. Did I pronounce that right? No, obviously I didn't do that right, but you're smiling. Tell me how to pronounce your last name.
Guidros.
Z?
With a G, Guidros, yes.
Anyway, I could tell if you wanted to ask a question, but I'll give you time to think about it. So who is it that's going to ask the questions?
Yeah, so we have a great first question that I think will be really great to get you started is, what are the supporting elements for an innovator? Is it his or her education or professional background, or is it the current needs and future human needs? So what are the supporting elements of creating an innovator?
Well, it's everything, but I think I've already covered that in my first comments. First of all, is persistence. I have one rule about technology, about jobs, about new ideas. There are no easy businesses. There are no easy constructs. They're all hard. There are every time you undertake to do something new, it turns out there are all kinds of obstacles that pop up. So persistence is crucial. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to be enthusiastic about it. And that enthusiasm is what keeps me alive. It's hard to imagine that somebody, I hate to talk about my age so much, but when I wake up in the morning, I have a bunch of things that I'm going to do during the day. And at least one or two of them is exciting enough that I look forward to it. And that is so important. I can't imagine just doing the same thing for the rest of my life. I've had a new career. I have a rule that says that every 7 years, you ought to have a new job, a new outlook in life. That doesn't mean you have to work for a different company. I worked for Motorola for 29 years, but somehow every 5, 6, 7 years, I got a new assignment and a new challenge. They never let me get comfortable. And that was the biggest favor anybody ever did for me. The importance of learning the rest of your life is, to me, a crucial element. The importance of persistence, of when the hard problems come along, when you get discouraged about something, if you really believe in it, and if you know it's the right thing to do, you just keep doing it. And the one that I already mentioned before, you accept the fact that you can't be right all the time. Everybody is human, people make mistakes. And when you do have a failure, you figure out what mistake did you make and go on to the next one. And I could spend a lot of time telling about my failures. I really prefer to talk about all my successes, but that's, I'd be delighted to do it any other way. I don't know if that's a reasonable answer to your question, but you were right, Nick. That is a very profound question, and will notice as I speak to other people, there will be many other aspects to entrepreneurism, to starting new things that are also important, other than the things that I mentioned. I'm going to try to be more brief in my other answers. So, is there anybody in this huge group of prospective students that wants to talk to me and challenge me and tell me that you don't believe a word I said and what your opinion is? There's somebody named Mustafa. You are my ideal audience. How do you pronounce your first name? Majd?
Majd Mustafa.
Mustafa is your last name. What's your first name?
First is Majd.
Maj. Yeah, I can tell you the way you are my favorite kind of audience, Maj, because you react to things that I say and you're smiling, and I appreciate it. So you have priority. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'd be happy to respond. To anybody?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anybody?
I think we got a raised hand from Eugene. Eugene, if you want to put it in the chat or if you want to say it out loud, feel free to ask your question.
You're not talking.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Yes, mine's a question. Yes, you're talking about the things you invited. I want to ask, did you see environment to be a contributing factor to you being able to invent what you invented? Let's say, for instance, you're living in a country, Nigeria, in the country that I'm living, which is Nigeria. Would it be possible for you to have still invented the things you invented?
You know, somehow your microphone, Eugene, is not totally compatible with my hearing, but Nick, did you hear what he said?
Yeah, I think he's asking about the environment of which you created your the cell phone in, and he is from Nigeria and wondering what your insight into creating in those different environments would be.
Well, first of all, Eugene, I think you already know that the world is just so full of problems of one kind of another that finding opportunities is not an issue. You just look around you and see whatever people are having difficulties with, and that will result in a problem that you can work on. And I could also say that every environment, I have no idea what it's like to be in Nigeria at this moment, but I know that it is different than being here. The very first issue, deciding what you work on, really has to be genuine. It really has to affect people's lives. I have a rule, all of you must be interested in technology if you're approaching Illinois Tech, or if you're considering Illinois Tech. After all, it is part of our name. I have a rule that says technology is the application of science to create products and services that make people's lives better. So Eugene, that's the number one issue. If the idea, if the principle, if the product that you're thinking about does not make people's lives better, then it's just curiosity, it's just research. There's nothing wrong with curiosity and research, but it is not technology. And for a lot of people, it's not what you want to spend their life doing. If you want to make products, if you want to get out and participate in the process of creating the future, then the technology is where you want to go, and curiosity doesn't fill the job. I know that there are some environments that are more forgiving than others. That's where one of the challenges you have when you go to work is to find an outfit that does respect what you have to contribute, that is not trying to put you in a box. And if that means that you have to start your own business, then perhaps you'll have to do that. The very first mistake I made is that I went to work for a company that made, it was called teletype. None of you knows what a teletype machine is, because this was nothing more than what we call a printer today, a teleprinter, except it was all mechanical. It had one electrical device, which is a motor, and everything else was mechanical. And the people that made this were geniuses. They had created the most fantastic mechanical device you could have, except electronics came along. And within a few years, this huge billion-dollar company actually disappeared. So, and it turns out that this, remarkably enough, this company was part of the Bell system, who turned out to be my enemy for the most of my life, including now, by the way, because there are still residues of what the Bell system thinking was about monopoly thinking. And I left Teletype Corporation after 1 year and was approached by Motorola. The first thing Motorola did was they stood me up on a blackboard and they grilled me and asked me questions, and made it clear to me that they were looking for people that were prepared to have the engineering capability, to develop the engineering capability to actually solve real problems. And so the environment that you get into has to be one that is compatible with what your desires are. And all I could tell you is you have to keep trying, and you have to understand what your specific environment is like. And as I say, Eugene, I really should know. I'm ashamed to say that Nigeria is one of the few countries that I have not been in. And I hope I get to go to visit your country sometime. And if I do, maybe you and I can meet in person. So anybody else, or should I just go on and ramble?
Great. There is an awesome question in the chat from Mohammed that is talking about career advice regarding working for a large company and becoming a pioneer.
Well, those are not incompatible, you know. There are large companies that invite people to criticize, to make changes, to do things differently. It really is more an attitude of specific companies. I have to tell you that being a pioneer is not easy if you do talk about the extremes. We have I was just about to use an example, which I just realized was not very useful now, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I want you to know I have no prejudices against anybody, but we have a saying that pioneers are the guys with arrows in their backs. when you are a pioneer, you are taking risks, you are fighting all of the establishment. And the establishment I define as people who are very satisfied with how things are, and they don't want changes. So being a pioneer, you really have to be tough, you have to be persistent, and you have to be prepared to have people tell you, this will never work. I cannot tell you how many people told me that the cell phone would never work. There are people that today tell me that using certain frequencies in the radio frequency band will never work. Well, of course they're wrong. The world is changing. Things are getting better. So I don't know if I'm responding to you about the environment. We have in the US, and I'm sure it's true in every other country of the world, a community of venture capitalists who are willing to invest in new ideas and new businesses. It sounds like these could be very helpful people. My experience with venture capitalists is, whereas they say they're interested in new, untried businesses, they really only want to invest in sure things. So you have to be prepared to be able to convince somebody that what you're doing is a sure thing, even when you know that there's a possibility it will fail. But the world today has got a huge number of problems. They need a lot of solutions. They need a lot of people that are willing to stick their necks out and try something different. When I speak on a worldwide basis, I don't think there has been a time in history that there are not more opportunities to break walls down, to do things differently, to make people's lives better. We have more tools available to us. We have almost every metric that involves humanity has shown improvements over the past and an increasing rate of improvement. So you will have to figure out how these comments that I'm making apply to you specifically in your country, but the opportunities are there, and shame on you if you can't figure out what they are, and build up the capability of approaching these things, build up the skills that are necessary to take on the different kinds of problems that occur. And by the way, you should know that your education is at a crucial point now. The university you select is going to be very important to you, but the real tools that you need to actually solve the problems don't start evolving until you get out of school and face those real problems. So what you're doing now is trying to learn, how to pick up the fundamentals of problem solving, of how things work, whether it's in physics, psychology. You have to understand about people, you have to understand about science, and then you have to go into the world knowing that you can make a difference. And that is so important that I can't overemphasize it. I don't know if I ducked your question or answered it, but that's it.
That was great. Thank you so much, Marty. We do have a few students who have raised their hands. The first one on my list is Amal. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Do you believe that you need to be intelligent to succeed, or is hard work enough on its own?
Do you need intelligence to succeed? Oh, I can look at you and I know you're smart, Amal. So don't, it sounds like you're worried about whether you're intelligent enough. Nobody has satisfactorily, to me, defined intelligence. The best definition that I saw, in fact, I only found it recently, and it's somebody who is willing to open their minds to understand what the world is like, and that is a very general definition, but we don't know what the basics of intelligence are. You will know as you start facing problems whether you have the tools to approach them and whether you can make a difference. How will you know that? It's very obvious. When you face the problem, the very first thing is to understand the problem itself. And believe it or not, that's a hard thing to do. But one of the most important things that I developed in my book was to point out that the biggest asset that I evolved over the years was self-confidence. It's kind of hard to develop self-confidence when you haven't been applied what intelligence you have to solving other problems. But I suspected, Amal, that you have done things in your life that you're proud of. Would you agree with that?
I guess so.
Yeah, I think so. But whatever it is, you have to start out with a positive attitude. You have to believe that you can do save the world, that you can change something. And you have to start out with things that are within your capabilities. And if you sign up with the rest, with the right assignment, whether it's a big company or picking an idea, as long as you pick on something that is within the scope of what you can manage, where you can understand the problem and you can solve small problems, as you develop the self-confidence, as you develop the tools, you will be able to solve bigger and bigger problems. So if I had advice to anybody, it's to forget about trying to measure your intelligence. Everybody thinks differently than every other person, and that's diversity of thinking that allows us to solve different kinds of problems. If we defined intelligence in a very narrow way, everybody would attack problems in the same way. It'd be a very boring world. So, as I told you when we started out, you're going to do great. Just keep smiling, by the way. You've got a great smile. You look, when you get pensive like that, you worry me because you're much too serious. Don't take life all that seriously. Thank you for that great question, Amal.
Thanks for your reply.
Great. I think we have time for maybe a few more, just to kind of wrap up at the end. I have one more student who is raising their hand. I know there's a few, and I think Mr. Nakamura was waiting for a little bit. Are you still with us?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming out and spending your time talking to us. That's very appreciated. You know, I really model myself after you. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous, but yeah, I follow your theory about you know, you have to keep learning throughout life or else you lose it. That's very true, and I've seen that myself. But I guess one of my biggest questions was, how did you anticipate the evolution of the technology that you innovated as it continued, and how were you able to anticipate the problems that we're facing today as a result of maybe corporate or just like, you know, other people putting their own input or ideas for maybe a capitalistic reason or something that I know that probably you wouldn't be about, you know? Yeah, so thank you very much.
Well, that's another very profound question. So let me tell you, let's start out from where I started before, where the idea of people being mobile came out because my assignment was to solve the problem of communicating for businesses and then for a specific police department. So you objectively look at the problems and try to figure out what it is that that the world is looking for. The one thing you don't want to get into is a box where you your beliefs take over and you're not continuously observing and learning. So let's talk about the cell phone for a while. The very first cell phones didn't do very much. They just talked and listened. It turns out that it became very obvious that data was important, that communicating between people and kind of the industry to manage that very well. And so we ended up with, it turns out that speech is one of the minor things that cell phones do today. The big things are social networking, and we've evolved a thing called the Internet of Things. And I only point out to you how at this point, there is a divergence among a lot of smart people, I don't consider myself necessarily one of them, about what the right direction is for cell phones today. Because if you are in some organizations, their statement is, oh, the future is the Internet of Things, 5G, 6G, that's where we ought to go. I don't happen to agree with that. I think that 5 and 6G are very important technologies. I think that managing machines remotely, being able to control factories remotely, even being able to do a medical operation remotely someday is going to be really important. But I don't know if you knew about the fact that today, a very simple thing like having access to the internet, that in the United States, 40%, at least 40% of students in the United States, going from the earliest their earliest years to college, don't have access to wireless internet. Right. I don't think you can get a complete education without access to the wireless internet. How can a civilized country, and I don't care which country it is in the world, because I don't think any of the countries that are represented here today are doing any better than we are, that any country that puts a priority over the Internet of Things instead of the Internet of People, I think is making a mistake. I believe that the technologies that we have available to us are capable of delivering wireless internet to everybody, not just the people in the city, not just people who can afford to spend the money. The governments should be able to provide the internet to ensure that the internet goes to people in rural areas, to people in the cities, to people who don't have the benefits of having large incomes. And so there is a balance that has to be created. So I know I'm dancing around your question, Mr. Nakamura. I didn't, your first name doesn't appear on here, but tell me if I diverged from what you asked.
I suppose, I guess a more specific question would be about, like, for example, the cell phone has evolved into something that's more widely accessible from the business sector to the public sector. But what I've noticed as a problem, which I've seen, is that companies such as like Apple, Android, they've been developing this technology around simplicity, which kind of, in a sense, makes the user almost unable to understand the technology they're using if they come from such an integrated space with, you know, like the Internet of Things.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. First of all, you know, if there is an expression of what we call baloney, namely, every word I could think of to express what Apple is doing and telling you that they're making things simple. they're telling us that everybody is different for everybody else. Therefore, all you have to do to solve that problem is to use the appropriate apps. Right? Isn't that what the Apple story is?
Yeah.
There it is. I don't know if you can see on my cell phone. Apps. Well, there it is. Now you can see on mine.
Yeah.
So there are 2 million apps on the in the Apple store. Now, just exactly how do we do that? It is basically hopeless. How do you solve that problem? Well, I've been working on that for years. And that's one of the problems and opportunities that I talked about. Because I have envisioned, those of you that will take the time out to look at my book, well, we can read it in greater detail. But I envision a cell phone in the future, and I'm not talking about a long time in the future, that has artificial intelligence built into it. There is already some artificial intelligence built into the phone. You should not have to look for an app. You ought to have an assistant on your cell phone, a computer, an artificial, call it whatever you want, that observes your habits and decides what things you're doing are routine enough so that they can be taken off of your list of things to do and will happen automatically. That is such a simple thing to conceive of. And the nature of the phone is going to change completely. It's going to, if you think about this phone, it is about as suboptimal a device as you could imagine. Just think about the fact that if you try to build a device or a system or a concept that does all things for all people, it's not going to do any of them optimally. And yet Apple and Samsung and all these people think they can build a universal device and make it out of a piece of plastic that's flat and put it against your curved head, and that this device is going to solve all of your problems. They're absolutely wrong. The cell phone is going to evolve into devices that are personalized, that are based upon the needs of the individual using the cell phone. You won't recognize what a cell phone is 20 years from now, because it's going to have a number of optimized characteristics. I'll give you an example of an optimized characteristic, which is the least important thing on a cell phone today for some people, and that's voice. The voice part of the cell phone ought to be as simple as perhaps something embedded under your skin near your ear. Maybe it'll be an earring, maybe it'll be something in your ear. And when you want to talk to somebody, you'll say, computer, well, maybe I'll call my computer Jacob. Jacob, get Amal on the phone for me. And Jacob will say, well, you know 3 different Amals. You want the one in New York, the one in India, the one in, well, I say, no, get the one in New York for me. And I'll be talking to Amal instantly, and maybe I'll be looking at her through my eyeglasses, or maybe not. But this will be an optimized system where I don't have to think about anything. I don't have to remember a telephone number. I don't have to remember what process to go through. The so-called phone, it's kind of amusing that we still call this a phone. It's not really a phone, is it? I don't know if I'm diverging from what you're talking about. Making the world a better place, as I said before, is not very hard, because there are so many ways in which we are suboptimal today. And Apple's going to get theirs, and so will Samsung. And the entrepreneurs are going to come along with better ideas that will be more flexible than these big companies. And at some point, you will see the biggest companies will either adapt or fail. And so if there is a new idea, a new way of doing something, there is some way in the world of executing on that idea. It's happening every day today, and it could be the smallest idea of somebody working in their garage on an idea, or it could be somebody with all the resources in the world at Google. But the number of problems is huge, and that's to me, that is an example of the number of opportunities there are. There is an infinite number of opportunities out there. Nakamura-san, since you won't tell me your first name, and it's only a question of your keeping your mind open and waiting for somebody to come along that gets you excited.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have time for one more question. I know we have a few who are still raising their hands here, and I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to get to all of you. In terms of mine, it looks like the first I have Ali. Would you like to end us out here with your final question?
Am I audible?
I see you, Ellie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
I'm very glad to have this opportunity to participate in this meeting and talking to you. I have a question. How do you see the role of academic education in our success? I mean that sometimes I feel academic education tries to normalize people. They try to make us the same. For example, a college or university wants all the students to be good in, for example, calculus, physics, but talents are different in different people. How do you see this subject? What's your opinion about this?
I have a very strong opinion about that, as I do about most things, Ali. You do not go to college to learn how somebody else is thinking and to fall into that same way of thinking. If that were the case, education would be worthless. We don't need a bunch of robots. We don't need people following other people's rules. Our educational system is not perfect yet. I've tried very hard in this discussion not to talk about IIT a great deal, but one of the things that they've tried very hard to do at IIT, it was true at IIT when I went to school there, oh my goodness, 70 years ago, can you imagine? But the IIT tends to be a more practical school. Yes, they will take time teaching you calculus and whatever the mathematical evolutions of that are. But the most important thing that happens when you learn those things is you're exercising your brain. You're building up the ability to absorb information about other things as well. So you picked the right thing when you talked about calculus. The only thing I've used calculus for since I graduated 100 years ago was to solve a riddle that somebody gave me a long time ago. But the fact that I have to learn calculus and I had to learn Maxwell's laws and I had to learn how to do matrix analysis. So that the exercise of my brain, and there's no question in my mind, it was very important in my ability to solve problems in the future. But more importantly than that, we had programs then and much more now that actually engage people in the total problem, not just the academic parts, but the parts about how do you assemble a team to accomplish something? How do you approach a problem and turn a idea into a product and a product into something that can be sold? And IIT has programs that do that. You cannot get away from learning some of the basics but it's also very useful to get some practical education as well. But Ali, having said all of those things, I happen to believe that Illinois Tech is a wonderful university, but the ability of you being able to solve big problems in the future, it depends upon you, not about your university. You have to be yourself. You have to be an individual. If you got a professor that's trying to convince you that his way of thinking is the only way, then he's a bad professor. And I hate to say this, but there are bad professors everywhere. So I think you don't need my help to solve this problem. I think you got the right idea already. You are an individual. You got your own mind. What you are going to school for is to build up the tools and the learning ability. Those two things: the tools, the skills, the learning ability, so you can go on and face new problems that these academics that you're talking about don't know anything about. You're going on way beyond what you're doing in school, but you do need some basic education. At least most people do. There are a few people that manage to get out there and do very narrow things. But I think you got the right idea, Ali. You are yourself an individual. You got a brain. You can figure a lot of these things out. The professors are only human. Nick, do we have to shut off at exactly 1 hour, or will Zoom shut us down? Or because I hate to, if there are other questions, I hate to prematurely shut down.
So this is the time that was allotted. So that's what we have for the Zoom call. If you feel comfortable staying on, or if you would like to potentially, we could share your contact information or a way to connect with you separate, or we could potentially have another event with you moving forward. I just want to be cognizant of everyone's time and what they signed up for. And so I do think we are going to end the questions kind of at this point. One thing I really wanted to point out too is based on what Mr. Cooper just said and kind of our individual programs we have. I'm putting a link in the chat to our Elevate program. So like we talked about, the Elevate program is really about individualizing your experience and making sure you get all of those outside of classroom experiences on top of your academics. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. I am going to quickly kind of close us out real quick before we get going. But again, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to chat moving forward.
Yeah, anybody that is not finding this useful, I will not be offended if you turn me off. But if you want to keep our conversation going, I'm enjoying it. I have to tell you that the questions that have been asked so far have been the best that I have ever heard. People keep coming up and asking me dumb questions like, what kind of cell phone do you use? Don't anybody ask me any questions like that. But, Amal and Ali and Nakamura, all those questions are just wonderful. And if anybody has things like that, whether they're useful answers or not, I'm happy to talk to you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Marty.
Yep.
Hello, Marty. It's a privilege to have this meeting with you.
Great.
I'm from Ghana.
Evelyn, do you have a question that you want to ask Mr. Cooper?
Yes, please. Mr.
Okay.
Cooper, please, would you have pursued tech if you were to be a child again? Will you still pursue technology?
Marty,
No.
did you hear that okay?
No, I did not.
Yep. So I think Evelyn is asking if you were a student again, or if you were a kid again, would you pursue the tech field again?
Wow, is that first of all, the immediate answer is very simple. No doubt in my mind, because even when I was 5 years old, I was curious about everything. I give an example in my book as I ran into some kids that were burning paper using a lens and magnifying the rays of the sun to burn paper. And I was so enthused about this, and I immediately got a Coke bottle and broke the bottom out and tried to use the bottom of a Coke bottle as a lens. I have been an experimenter my whole life, and that's where I learned about failing, because most of my experiments fail. But you don't have to be a technologist to succeed in the world. I think if you want to be a technologist, you will pretty much know it, because your mind will be wired that way. But I should mention to you that when I started at IIT, at Illinois Tech, in 1950, I have to think about, 1946 is when I started at IIT. I was a physics major, because I figure physics is the basis of all technology, all science, right? Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
So the first year, everybody takes the same courses, at least they did then. And one of the courses I had to take was chemistry. Well, I discovered that there are some parts of technology that I was just not compatible with. Every laboratory experiment that I had to do somehow failed. If I had two substances and I was supposed to throw one away and keep the other one, I'd do the wrong one. So at the end of the first year, I looked at the curriculum, and if I was going to be a physics major, I had to take chemistry again. So that's how I became an electrical engineer. So I'm only pointing out to you that it's the wisdom of whoever set up that first year's course, I think, was very important. You can't decide at this stage of your life exactly what you're going to do in the future. And very many people that have electrical engineering degrees or physics degrees, the education that you get is a lot more than just the specific courses of this specific technology. That's why we have courses at IIT. They call it iPro, I think, so that where people actually learn how to start a business and to run the business. And why even the games they play at IIT, where they have contests of who can throw a pumpkin, or build a machine that can throw a pumpkin further, as an example. So the main thing is that you find a compatibility with the general area and get as broad an education as you can. And education is everything. It's not just the science, it's not just the technical courses. It is, how do you deal with people? How do you deal with business? How do you research? How do you use the internet appropriately? All of those things are important. And if you do get what I call a complete education, the world is your apple. The opportunities are infinite, and you will, if you need additional education, the ability to get that is so available now to everybody that you will not, in your first few years, exactly know what you're going to do in the future. Anybody else?
Great, thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you again for extending the time here, Marty. That's so great of you to take some time out of your schedule. So we did get one in the chat who's been raising his hand. He said, I am a prospective PhD student who has the vision to create cell phone batteries from waste. What skills are important to achieve this endeavor?
Well,
do you have any recommendations for him?
Yeah, believe it or not, I actually built a battery business at Motorola some years ago. But this is way before modern technology. It was even before the concept of a lithium-ion battery. So, I just point out to you how incompetent I was at chemistry, and yet I understood enough about batteries, about the importance of batteries in the future, that I actually went out and bought a business from another company so that Motorola could manufacture their own batteries. So if you want specific advice on what to do with the batteries themselves, you're going to have to first get educated on what it does, what is required to build a battery. I think your objective is very important. Think of all the batteries that are being used today. There are in the world today, there are more cell phones than there are people. So here you're talking about 8 billion batteries that are only going to last a couple of years. What's going to happen to all those batteries in the future? It's a horribly big problem. And so your thought that the way to go is to somehow, whether it's the old batteries or some different kind of waste, how you can extract value to the environment from that, I think is very desirable. But you're going to have to find out who's doing the research, where the battery experts are. I really don't know whether Illinois Tech has such skills and some battery people, but I think that's essential. I ought to point out to you that the battery business was one of my failures. Why? Why did I think we needed to have our own batteries? At the time that we created the cell phone, 100% of batteries for the kinds of applications we're talking about were tubular, cylindrical. Think about it. You're trying to build a device that's as small as possible, and you put this device is rectangular in form, and you're going to squeeze a round object in it. Wasted space, right? And so what we bought that battery business for was so we could create what I call a prismatic battery, a battery that filled up the rectangular space and therefore was more efficient. And sure enough, it worked, and we did produce things. But Motorola decided, or my successors decided, that at least in the short term, we were better off having other people build these batteries for us, because still a lot of the batteries we're using cylindricals were appropriate, and they ended up selling the business off. If I had stayed in my role, we would have been making the smallest, most efficient batteries in the world, and it would have been a multi-billion-dollar business for Motorola. So the answer to your question, I always give very long answers to short questions, is you got to find out who the experts are. If you're going to be a PhD, learn about the chemistry and the physics of what batteries are, build up your fundamental knowledge in that area of physics and chemistry, and then find out who in the world is doing the best research in that area. And I wish you good luck in solving that problem. Batteries are a huge restriction on personal communications. The bigger, the more, better battery life, the smaller the battery life, the more useful our devices are going to be. Who's next? Anybody? Are you bored yet? If you're bored, just hang up.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hello. Good evening from Nigeria. Good morning from Nigeria. It's a privilege to meet you on live, sir. So from what I read about you in the past, I actually noted the fact that there's a statement about you that was written in Wikipedia that says Cooper assembled a team that designed and assembled a product in less than 90 days. That original answer called the Dynatech 8000X. So my question is, what was the process like for you coming up with the team that actually made that phone in less than 90 days? That was like a sprint to me. That was huge.
So I can't tell you, Charles, how smart that question is. You know that we did not create all of the technology that went into that first telephone. in 90 days. The challenge that we had was reaching out in a company that had a semiconductor division, that had a group who were expert on antennas, that had another group that were expert on filters, and other groups that were somehow within this corporation. We had the ideas and the skills to solve all of the problems that involved this first phone. And the most important thing we had was a dedication of the guys who were running the company. And the decision was made by the chairman of the board, Bob Galvin, who was the son of the founder. And my boss was a guy named John Mitchell. He supported me 100%. And they allowed me to go wander around the company, go into laboratories that I was already conversant with, because I was always a techie that was looking for new ideas. And I pulled together 20 or 30 of the smartest specialists that I could find. And they reached out in the company. They had to invent a number of specific things that were advances. But the bottom line is that it took a dedicated management to let me have that freedom, the freedom to go and bring all of those smart people together. I don't want to minimize what the individuals did. I can only mention you one specific problem, which was the ability for a handheld phone to talk and listen at the same time. And those of you that are already conversant with electrical engineering know that you're dealing with a signal that as much as a watt of energy, which is what you're going to transmit. The received signal that you're reaching out for, that you're trying to pull out of the air, is a billionth of a watt. And those have to coexist in this phone at the same time. And you have to be able to tell the difference between the two. The device that we had been used up until then for a car phone, the device that made that distinction between the receive and transmit signal was almost as big as this cell phone. And so what these guys did in 90 days was they miniaturized it. They took all the best technology they had and squeezed it down so that ended up being about this big. So if you haven't figured out now that these guys were willing to take a chance, that they knew what the basics are, they had the tools, and they had the self-confidence, and they succeeded.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marty. I'm so sorry. We're going to, for one final question here. Juan said, a big problem that I think is stopping people from going after what they want or taking risks is fear of failure. My question is, how do you get over that? You might be muted here. There you go.
There you got it. That's my first example of failure. You know, I swear to you, I didn't do a thing to make my microphone turn off. It went off by itself. So, and you get the feeling like the whole world is against you. That's what happens when you fail. I never said for a second that failure could be a pleasure. I never said that you just feel ordinary about failure. When you fail, you feel very bad. And it's that feeling that you have to get over and understand that the experience you got was worth that bad feeling. There's some people that just can't take it. Well, then don't be an inventor. Don't be somebody who is trying to do something very different. So you have to accept the fact that when you fail at something, the only right attitude is to say, well, bad luck, but I'm going to figure out how to fix that and do it different next time. I will have learned something from that, And maybe the thing I learned is not to try something that hard, but you do learn from every experience. And feeling bad is not a bad experience. Just think about it. If you were happy all the time, you wouldn't know why happiness is a good thing. I could see a lot of skepticism in that remark. So sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you so much, Marty, for coming and joining us today. We are so excited that all of you were able to spend your Sunday with us. We here at Illinois Tech prepare you to use your skills to discover, create, and solve problems in the world around you. If you are interested in learning more about Illinois Tech, feel free to, I'm going to put some links in the chat. Feel free to reach out to either their graduate or undergraduate admission office. We are happy to answer any questions that you might have in order to make it seem like Illinois Tech is going to be an option for you. Additionally, prospective undergraduates can also gain career experience before you even apply. We're currently offering 4-week internship in digital marketing, entrepreneurship and innovation, data visualization, project management, esports and game design, and cybersecurity. If that is something you are interested in, I'm also going to drop a little link in the chat as well. Thanks again for all of you for attending our visit today. Thank you, Marty, for coming and joining us and sharing all of your experience and knowledge with us. I know that I personally learned a great deal from you as well. Thank you all for coming. We hope you have a fantastic afternoon. Marty, do you want to say anything to end us off here?
Would you mind passing just to this group of people here, if you can do that, my email address? You've all been so nice that you've hung in. I could see the smiles on your faces. The fact that you listen to an old codger like me talking all this time, I really appreciate it. If you have a question or something, comment to make, I'd be thrilled if you send me an email. Give me a little time to respond, but I promise you that I will answer every email that I get. And you got my email address, so you could pass it on to them, right?
Yeah, so we will make sure to pass that along for these students who stuck along after the visit today.
Great. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you very much.
everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too.